The restaurant hummed with warmth, clinking glasses, bursts of laughter, the scent of garlic and butter drifting from the kitchen. Romano's had always felt like my second home. But tonight, for the first time, I sat here not as a waitress, not in my apron, not taking orders, but as a guest. The red vinyl booth pressed against my back as I adjusted the navy dress I'd carefully ironed that morning. David sat to my right, scrolling on his phone between forced smiles. Across from us, Margaret, my mother-in-law, was all pearls and precision, her posture sharp as a blade. Emma lounged beside her, thumbs hovering over her phone camera, waiting. It was my 31st birthday. The cake had just been set down, its frosting bright against the dim light of the corner booth. Candles flickered, smoke curling upward as everyone clapped politely, even a few strangers at nearby tables. I smiled, closed my eyes, and made a wish. When I opened them, Margaret's hands were already inside her handbag. "From all of us," she said, her voice slicing through the air with a practiced elegance. She produced a pale pink envelope decorated with silver butterflies that shimmered under the lights. She held it aloft like an offering, her smile poised, sharp. The envelope landed in front of me with a soft thud. It looked festive, harmless, almost beautiful. "Go on," she urged. "Open it." David angled his phone toward me. His finger hovered on the record button, face lit with excitement. Emma raised hers too, capturing the moment from another angle. Their anticipation felt strange, wrong, like the charged hush before lightning cracks the sky. The restaurant around us blurred. I could only see their eyes, watching me, waiting. I slid a finger under the flap and tore the paper open. The first thing I saw was the stark black print of legal letterhead. My pulse faltered. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The words blurred for a moment, then sharpened into knives. Divorce papers. On my birthday. At my restaurant. Margaret's smile widened, triumphant. Emma leaned forward, capturing my face in high definition. David's hand trembled with eagerness, desperate to fill my heartbreak. They wanted a performance, my humiliation, served on silver platters, preserved forever on their cameras. I lifted my gaze slowly. Their faces swam before me, Margaret's eyes gleaming, Emma biting back laughter, David's jaw tight with anticipation. The envelope had been a weapon all along. The candles on the cake sputtered, wax dripping onto the frosting. Around us, the chatter of other diners carried on, oblivious. But in our booth, time had narrowed to a razor's edge. My fingers tightened around the papers. I should have felt shattered, exposed, wrecked. Instead, there was something else. A clarity I hadn't known in months. The morning light poured pale gold across the kitchen floor as I patted down in my slippers, craving coffee before my shift at Romano's. I expected silence, the usual stillness of early hours. But she was already there. Margaret. She sat at the table, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, her posture hunched with concentration. In front of her, a spread of official-looking papers, dozens of them. Her fingers traced the margins as she scribbled furious notes in red ink. For a second, she didn't hear me. The only sound was the scratch of her pen. When my footsteps creaked across the hardwood, her head snapped up. The look on her face, it wasn't guilt. It wasn't even surprise. It was something darker. Satisfaction. Her hands moved quickly, almost too quickly for a woman in her 60s. She gathered the papers into a neat stack and slid them into an envelope, pale pink, embossed in silver. My name glimmered faintly on the front. Happy birthday. She smiled stretched tight across her face. Artificial. Rehearsed. She held up the envelope, running her manicured fingers along its edges. I picked this one specially for you. I forced a polite smile, masking the unease tugging at my chest. Thank you. Is that, paperwork for something? Her laugh was light, airy, like bells tinkling. It was wrong. Oh, just some family business I've been working on. David doesn't even know about it yet. You'll see, it's something that will change everything. The way she said it, almost reverent, almost gleeful, made me pause. For 2 years, Margaret had shown no interest in gifts, in surprises, in sentiment, and now she was suddenly orchestrating some grand gesture? I wanted to believe her. I wanted to think, maybe, finally, I had earned her approval. So I let myself hope. The days leading to my birthday were strange, electric with tension I couldn't name. Margaret's voice on the phone was warmer than usual, checking my schedule. Emma, who usually ignored me, smiled mysteriously when the dinner came up. Even David seemed more affectionate, kissing me longer at night, whispering in my hair, "Tomorrow will be a day you'll never forget." I believed him. I let myself believe all of them, that they were planning something meaningful, that maybe, after years of disapproval, I'd finally be welcomed. I spent hours choosing the navy dress, smoothing every wrinkle, rehearsing conversations in the mirror where Margaret praised me, where Emma treated me like a sister, where David's pride in me was real again. But under the hope, there was a sliver of unease, sharp, unyielding. The divorce papers lay heavy in my hands, their edges cutting faintly into my palms. Around us, Romanos hummed, waiters carrying steaming plates, forks clinking against china, glasses clattering in toasts. Life continued, indifferent. Margaret leaned forward, her eyes glittering. "Well?" she asked. Her voice was sugar, but underneath, steel. "Aren't you going to say something?" Her words stretched the silence taut, a rope ready to snap. David's phone was steady now, recording everything. Emma's lens was unblinking, hungry. They wanted tears, a breakdown, begging. I looked at them, really looked at them. My husband, who had once sworn to protect me, his sister, who had never seen me more than an intruder, and Margaret, the architect of every wound I had carried since the day I married into their family. I inhaled slowly. The air smelled of garlic bread, of birthday cake, of freedom. Then I picked up the pen. The ink flowed smooth as I signed my name across the bottom of the page. Margaret's smile faltered. Emma's recording wavered. David's hand shook with confusion. "That's it?" David asked. You're not even going to fight this?" I slid the papers back into the pink envelope, tucked it neatly, and looked at them with a calmness I hadn't felt in years. "Thank you," I said softly. "This is the best gift you could have given me." Their faces, their faces. Confusion, disbelief, a flicker of fear. And beneath it all, the faintest recognition, they hadn't broken me. They had set me free. I stood. The room swayed slightly as every diner near our booth turned their eyes toward us, curiosity prickling in the air. Margaret's mouth opened, then closed. Emma's recording wavered. David's hand shook. But me? I felt lighter than I had in months. Because what they didn't know, what they could possibly not know, was that I had already made my choice, and I was no longer theirs to destroy. The first family event after our honeymoon should have been simple, celebratory, warm, welcoming. It was Michael's graduation party, David's cousin. I'd spent 2 hours getting ready, a conservative black dress, small pearl earrings, makeup barely more than neutral shades. My hope was simple: to blend in, to make no mistakes. The Walsh family lived in a sprawling house of polished oak floors and expensive furniture. When Margaret opened the door, she kissed the air near my cheek, her lips never touching skin, and steered me toward a circle of women I didn't know. "This is David's wife," she announced. "She works in the service industry." She paused just long enough. Let the words sink in. Let them wrinkle the air like something unpleasant. Aunt Patricia's eyebrows climbed. Cousin Janet made a soft, pitying sound. "Oh, Janet said, her smile pulling taut. How
Interesting. What kind of service work? I opened my mouth. Margaret cut across me like a blade. She's still figuring things out. Just temporary, of course. She'll find something more suitable. The circle tightened around me. Conversations turned to law internships, corporate promotions, engagements to doctors. I stood there, a shadow at my own introduction, reduced to Margaret's footnote. When someone asked about my background, she redirected effortlessly. David's accounting practice is really taking off. We're so proud. It was my first glimpse of the rules. In this family, I was never the subject, only the segue. 3 months later, the table stretched with roast turkey, crystal glasses, polished silver. Laughter and voices interwove like music, until it was my turn. We went around sharing what we were thankful for. Emma's engagement, Michael's internship, Patricia's new house. Margaret clasped her hands. I'm thankful for Emma's engagement to Dr. Patterson and David's growing client base. It's wonderful to see young people establishing themselves so well. Then silence. No mention of me. My name didn't exist. When it was my turn, I smiled, swallowed the lump in my throat, and said I was thankful for family and health. Later, in the kitchen, Patricia cornered me, under the hum of the dishwasher. Margaret just wants the best for David. Have you thought about going back to school? There are opportunities for women willing to improve themselves. Her voice was syrupy, but the weight was heavy. They had all discussed me. They had all agreed. I was inadequate. The Walsh living room glowed with fairy lights and cinnamon candles. Gift wrap tore across the floor in a storm of glitter and ribbon. Emma unwrapped a silk scarf, expensive and elegant. Margaret handed me a package wrapped in newspaper. Inside, a book, Professional Success for Women. Her smile was polite. I thought you'd find this useful. Everyone else received gifts. I received homework. The pages felt heavier than textbooks. In February, Margaret hosted a lavish dinner for David's 32nd birthday. The restaurant sparkled, chandeliers throwing fractured light across the tables. His colleagues were there, accountants, managers, lawyers. I wore my best dress, my most careful smile. Conversations flowed around stocks, investments, corporate trends. When someone asked about my work, David stepped in before I could speak. She's exploring different opportunities, he said quickly, eyes sliding away from mine. The man who once bragged about my hard work now treated me like a family secret. Margaret nodded approvingly. The humiliation crescendoed at Easter. Margaret's friend Carol, a retired executive, sat across the table. She asked politely about my background. She's between opportunities, considering her options. Margaret interrupted smoothly. I blinked, words dying in my throat. Carol smiled, tight and pitying. That's wonderful, dear. So many women reinvent themselves later in life. Later, I excused myself to the powder room, locked the door, and sobbed into tissues. My reflection blurred, mascara streaking down my face. Margaret was rewriting my life in real time, turning my steady work into confusion, my effort into failure, my name into silence. The breaking point came late one night. I was upstairs folding laundry when Margaret's voice drifted through the floorboards. She was on the phone with her friend Helen. I keep praying he'll come to his senses before it's too late. David deserves someone who can enhance his life, not hold him back. Her words were precise, surgical. Not about my job, not about my choices, about my existence. I sank onto the floor, clutching one of David's shirts. My chest felt hollow, my breath thin. Acceptance was never possible. It had never been the goal. By spring, the damage had seeped into everything. I stopped recognizing myself in mirrors. Shopping bags cluttered the bedroom. Blazers, pencil skirts, heels I couldn't afford. I bought them hoping to look like the women Margaret admired. Credit card balances ballooned. My reflection shrank. David's face, once warm, now carried shame when I spoke of work. He cut me off mid-sentence, changed topics. The family chat buzzed daily with Emma's links about inspirational women. Every article came with thinly veiled jabs, see, goals, motivation. I answered with polite emojis. They answered with silence. Desperation took form in job applications. I rewrote my resume until the paper felt bruised, turned waitressing into coordinating service delivery under high-pressure conditions, turned tip money into client satisfaction metrics. Cover letters bled with effort. Each rejection bled me further. Henderson Insurance dismissed me within minutes. Your background is quite limited. Westfield Insurance made me wait 2 hours in the lobby, then gave me a spreadsheet test I failed miserably. One manager chuckled when I said my expected salary out loud. Each humiliation was another echo of Margaret's voice. Some people just aren't meant for professional environments. I enrolled at the local community college. Introduction to business, accounting, communication, paid tuition with the money I'd saved for furniture. In class, I was invisible again. Students with corporate jobs spoke confidently. I scribbled notes in silence. But when I handed in essays, Professor Martinez praised me. You have practical insight. You understand people. For 3 hours a week, I felt smart, capable, seen. Then I'd come home and David would scroll through his phone, nod absently. Maybe Margaret will be impressed when you finish. Even my success was ammunition for her approval. Summer rolled in with heavy air and heavier silence. I'd applied to 47 jobs, rejected by all. The rejections piled in a rubber-banded folder. The words burned into my mind. Not qualified, not the right fit. Looking for someone with more experience. Margaret's weekly calls were tiny celebrations in disguise. "How's the search going, dear?" She'd coo, her tone thick with amusement. When I answered honestly, silence, no progress, she'd sigh. Not everyone is cut out for certain types of work. And then, one morning, the sound of her pen scratching across papers in the kitchen, the red ink, the pink envelope, her face lighting with satisfaction. That was 3 days before my birthday. David lay beside me in bed, his arm heavy across my waist, his lips brushing my hair. "Tomorrow will be a day you'll never forget," he whispered. I thought he meant love. I thought he meant celebration. His words were a goodbye. And so I stood in Romano's, the pink envelope in my hand, the divorce papers spread across my lap, cameras recording. Their cruelty had been years in the making, a campaign of erasure, humiliation, slow poison. And yet, as the ink dried on my signature, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Because Margaret thought she was destroying me, but I had already begun building a life without her.
The laundry basket sat heavy on the kitchen table, filled with David's work shirts and my worn navy uniform from Romano's. The house was silent except for the spin of the dryer down the hall. I was folding collars with mechanical precision when my phone buzzed. An unknown number lit the screen. Telemarketers had become routine. I usually ignored them. But something, a tug, a strange instinct made me swipe to answer. "Hello, is this Jennifer Walsh?" The voice was warm, professional, deliberate. My own name sounded strange, like it had weight again. "Yes," I said, cautious.
This is Jessica Martinez from Grand Plaza Hotel's Human Resources Department. We received your application for our guest services coordinator position. My heart stuttered. My throat closed for a moment. That application had been sent 6 months earlier, a desperate late-night submission in the middle of February when snow piled against the windows and rejection emails filled my inbox. I had assumed it vanished into nothing. Jessica continued, "I wanted to see if you're still interested in discussing opportunities with us." Still interested. 2 words I hadn't heard in months. I sat down hard in the chair, laundry forgotten. "Yes," I managed, my voice trembling. "I'm very interested." Her laugh was light, genuine. "Wonderful! I have to tell you, your restaurant experience really caught our attention. Candidates with your background often excel in hospitality. You understand customer service from the ground up." My breath hitched. The words wrapped around me like a blanket after months of cold. She wasn't apologizing for my experience. She was valuing it. Jessica explained the role. $42,000 to $48,000 salary, full benefits, medical, dental, retirement, educational assistance, housing included in their employee residence just 5 minutes from the hotel. Each detail landed like thunder. Health insurance I'd never had. A retirement plan I thought belonged only to other people. A furnished apartment far from Margaret's shadow. I pressed the phone harder to my ear, needing to be sure I wasn't mishearing. "Would you be available for a phone interview later this week?" Jessica asked. "Yes," I whispered. Then stronger. "Yes, absolutely." "Perfect. Thursday at 2?" I scrawled the time on the back of a wrinkled receipt, my hand shaking. When the call ended, silence swallowed me. Then I laughed. An unfamiliar, unsteady laugh that turned into tears. My hands pressed against my mouth as relief flooded through me. For the first time in months, maybe years, someone had seen me as capable. Someone outside Margaret's orbit. I didn't tell David. Not that night, not the next morning. The instinct came sharp and immediate. This was mine. Mine alone. I folded the receipt and tucked it into my wallet like a talisman. Margaret was still circling, still asking about my schedule, still planning the dinner. Emma's texts dripped with strange enthusiasm. This birthday will be memorable. I smiled politely, nodded when David hinted at surprises. Inside, I was holding a weapon they couldn't imagine. The interview pep consumed me. I locked myself in the bedroom, scrolling through Grand Plaza's website, memorizing their values, their brand. Luxury, guest satisfaction, service excellence. Everything Margaret had mocked, my years at Romano's, my ability to keep 6 tables spinning in my head, my habit of remembering regulars' names and favorite meals, suddenly looked like gold. In the mirror, I practiced answers. How do you handle difficult guests? Tell me about a time you solved a problem under pressure. I could answer those without hesitation. I'd been living them every day. Meanwhile, David grew giddy, checking his phone constantly, whispering with Emma and Margaret. When I asked what they were planning, he only smiled, kissed my cheek. "You'll see." I wanted to scream, "So will you!" Margaret called one last time to confirm. "Remember, dear, nothing too formal. You'll want to be comfortable for what we have planned." Her voice trembled with anticipation. She thought she was about to win. I hung up, walked to my jewelry box, and placed a folded piece of paper inside. Not the rejection letters, not Margaret's words. The official email, printed fresh on Grand Plaza letterhead. Job offer. Guest services coordinator. $45,000 annual salary. Benefits. Housing. I traced my finger over the hotel's elegant crest. Tomorrow night, their pink envelope would collide with mine. The city shimmered in morning light as I stood in front of the mirror, fastening the navy dress. My hands smoothed the fabric again and again, as if I could iron courage into my skin. Sandra, my hairdresser, styled my curls into soft waves, misting hairspray like perfume. "You're glowing," she said. "Something good's happening, isn't it?" I met her eyes in the mirror and smiled. "Something wonderful." She winked. Then tonight, you walk in there like you already own the room. I left the salon with my secret folded in my purse, feeling like armor pressed against my ribs. 2 o'clock. I locked myself in the bedroom, blinds drawn, phone pressed to my ear. Jessica's voice poured steady warmth through the line. She asked about problem solving, teamwork, communication under pressure. And for the first time in months, I didn't stammer, didn't shrink. I spoke about Romanos, about Maria in the kitchen, about Tony learning the ropes, and about late nights balancing 10 orders while keeping every guest smiling. You're exactly what we look for. Your references are glowing. Mr. Romano had wonderful things to say about your reliability and professionalism. I choked back tears. The formal job offer landed in my email that evening. Salary confirmed. Start date, 2 weeks. I printed 3 copies, one for me, one for safekeeping, and one I folded into my purse ready for war. By the time I zipped my heels and slid on a coat, I was vibrating with quiet certainty. David's excitement had grown unbearable. He kept glancing at his phone, sharing secret looks with Emma. Margaret's texts chimed like clockwork. "We can't wait for tonight."
Romano's smelled of garlic, fresh bread, and nostalgia. The red curtains filtered the evening light into gold streaks across the tables. Waiters wove between booths with practiced grace, their trays loaded with steaming plates. For 3 years, I had walked these floors as staff. Tonight, I walked in as a guest. "Jennifer," Mr. Romano's booming voice carried from the counter. His apron was dusted with flour, his smile broad. "The birthday girl." I introduced my in-laws with pride I didn't feel. "This is my husband, David, his mother, Margaret, his sister, Emma." Mr. Romano shook their hands warmly, oblivious to the daggers hidden behind Margaret's smile. "We'll take good care of you tonight." Margaret's eyes flicked around the dining room, unimpressed. Red vinyl booths, handwritten specials board, mismatched chairs. To me, it was home. To her, it was beneath her. Still, she was here. That alone felt significant. We slid into the corner booth. Margaret sat across from me, Emma beside her, phone already in hand. David took the spot at my right, his phone buzzing every few minutes. I pretended not to notice their glances, their secret smiles. Menus opened, closed, orders were placed. "The chicken parmesan is excellent," I offered, my voice too bright. "Mr. Romano's wife makes the sauce from her grandmother's recipe." Margaret's lips curved politely. "Lobster ravioli," she told the server, choosing the most expensive dish on the menu. Emma ordered steak, rare. David barely looked up, distracted by his phone. Conversation limped forward. Margaret asked about my classes with feigned interest, nodding at answers she didn't hear. Emma scrolled. David smiled at text messages he wouldn't share. "You've been working so hard," Margaret said finally, her voice syrupy. "It's admirable, really." Emma snorted, disguising it as a cough. I swallowed, smiled, pretended not to notice the setup. When the plates were cleared, Sandra, a newer waitress I'd helped train, approached with a cake glowing with candles. The restaurant erupted into song. Regular customers joined in, clapping, smiling. For a moment, it felt genuine, a rare, fleeting joy. I closed my eyes, inhaled the sweetness of frosting and smoke, and wished not for acceptance, not for love, but for courage. The candles died in a puff of smoke. When I opened my eyes, Margaret's hands were already in her purse. She withdrew the decorated envelope with a flourish. Pale pink, silver butterflies, festive, innocent. "From all of us," she announced, her voice carrying across the dining room. Other diners turned, curious. Emma raised her phone, recording. David adjusted his camera to focus on my face. The performance had begun. I took the envelope. Its weight was wrong, heavier than paper should be. My fingers trembled as I slid it open.
Legal header. Black ink. Stark words. Petition for dissolution of marriage. The room tilted. For a second, the letters blurred. Then they sharpened into knives. Divorce papers. On my birthday. In my restaurant. Margaret's smile widened, triumphant. Emma's eyes gleamed behind her phone screen. David's jaw was tight with anticipation. They were waiting for my collapse, for tears, for begging. I inhaled slowly. The smell of butter and wine, the hum of conversations around us, the clatter of forks, all of it blurred into white noise. I lifted my gaze. "Well?" Margaret asked sweetly, her voice sugar over steel. "Aren't you going to say something?" They wanted humiliation. I gave them silence. I picked up the pen they had placed neatly beside the envelope. The ink flowed smooth across the page. My signature steady, final. The sound of pen on paper seemed to echo louder than the chatter of the restaurant. Margaret blinked. Emma's phone dipped slightly. David frowned, uncertain. "That's it? You're not going to fight? You're not even going to ask why?" I folded the papers neatly, slid them back into the envelope, and placed it on the table. "Thank you," I said, standing slowly. My voice was calm, clear, louder than I intended. "This is the most generous gift you could have given me." The booth stilled. Margaret's triumphant smile faltered. Emma's thumb froze above the record button. David's face crumpled into confusion. I reached into my purse. My fingers closed around another envelope, plain white, thick with promise. I unfolded the letter, holding the elegant crest of the Grand Plaza Hotel high enough for them to see. 3 days ago, I was offered a position at the Grand Plaza Hotel, guest services coordinator, $45,000 a year, full benefits, housing included. The silence was electric. Margaret's mouth fell open. Emma lowered her phone, stunned. David's camera captured nothing but his own disbelief reflected in the black screen. The restaurant leaned closer, curious. "This job," I continued, my voice carrying across the booth, "is in another city. I start in 2 weeks." The words tasted like freedom. At first, silence. Then Mr. Romano's voice boomed from behind the counter. "Jennifer! That's wonderful news!" Maria appeared in the kitchen window, wiping her hands on her apron. "You deserve this, chica." Tony clapped loudly from across the room. Customers joined in, one by one, until the entire restaurant erupted in acclamation. Mrs. Patterson raised her water glass. "To Jennifer and her bright future." Laughter, cheers, clinking glasses. The humiliation Margaret had orchestrated collapsed under the weight of genuine celebration. The recording Emma intended as evidence of my shame now captured her own mother's failure. "You knew?" David's voice was a strangled whisper. "I knew I deserved better," I said simply. Margaret's face shifted through disbelief, fury, then fear. This is rash, dear. You can't just..." "I've been listening to you for 2 years. Every criticism, every backhanded comment, every prayer that I'd disappear from David's life. And you were right about one thing, Margaret." I leaned closer, my words ablaze. "I do deserve better." Gasps rippled through nearby tables. Emma fumbled to shut off her phone, but the damage was done. The moment had been witnessed, recorded, immortalized. I gathered my purse, straightened my dress, and turned toward the door. Behind me, Margaret's face was pale, Emma's lips pressed thin, David's hands limp at his sides. Ahead, Romano's was alive with applause, with smiles, with voices cheering me on. I stepped out into the cool night air. The street was quiet, the world wide open. For the first time in years, I felt light, free. And I knew one thing with certainty. Their ambush had failed. I had turned their weapon into my liberation.
2 weeks later, I stood in the marble lobby of the Grand Plaza Hotel. The chandeliers glittered like constellations. A pianist played soft jazz in the corner. Guests swept through in tailored suits and silk dresses, dragging suitcases that gleamed under the lights. And there I was, in my new uniform, crisp navy with silver accents. A nameplate pinned to my chest read, Jennifer Walsh, Guest Services Coordinator. Not David's wife, not she. My name, my role, my worth. I caught my reflection in the mirrored pillars, composed, professional, almost regal. For once, I didn't shrink from the image. That night, I unlocked the door to my employee apartment. The space was small but beautifully furnished. Modern sofa, glass coffee table, bed with white sheets that smelled of lavender detergent. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. I stood barefoot on the balcony sipping coffee in silence. No footsteps above me, no Margaret knocking on the door, no whispered conversations I wasn't meant to hear. Just me and the hum of the city below. For the first time in years, I felt at home. Jessica Martinez wasn't just HR. She became my anchor. At my 30-day review, she sat across from me with a warm smile. Jennifer, you've exceeded expectations. Your restaurant experience gave you instincts most people can't be trained for. You anticipate needs, you read people. That's invaluable. Her praise made my throat tighten. For so long, I'd heard only the opposite. Jessica leaned in. We have a management track program. I'd like to nominate you. The words felt like music, like justice. By the 4th month, I was promoted to Assistant Guest Services Manager. A raise pushed my salary above $50,000. I signed the papers with a steady hand, remembering the ink on my divorce papers. How different this felt. A signature sealing growth instead of loss. I bought my first real business suit with that paycheck. Dark gray, fitted, powerful. When I walked into the lobby wearing it, I felt taller, stronger. News traveled quickly. Linda, one of Margaret's country club friends, checked into the hotel on a business trip. Her eyes widened when she saw my name on the directory. "You're managing here?" she asked, genuinely surprised. I smiled. "Yes, can I help with your event arrangements?" Linda gushed about my professionalism for days. Her glowing review reached Margaret's ears within a week. For years, Margaret had painted me as a failure. Now, her own friends were dismantling that lie. The divorce proceedings played out like a courtroom drama. David's lawyer tried to argue financial entitlement, but the video, the one he had filmed so eagerly, became evidence of cruelty. The judge watched in silence as the footage played. Margaret handing me divorce papers in a crowded restaurant, David recording my reaction, Emma grinning in the corner. When the video ended, the courtroom was ice cold. The judge's words were final. This demonstrates premeditated emotional harm. The petitioner is not entitled to alimony or division beyond the minimal assets already agreed upon. Margaret's pink envelope had destroyed them legally as well as morally. David tried to reach me after the settlement. Texts, emails, a message request on LinkedIn. "We should talk. I made a mistake." I ignored them all. He wanted to step back into my light now that I'd found it, but he'd chosen his darkness long ago. 6 months in, the hotel held its annual Employee Recognition Gala. I stood on stage in a ballroom dripping with chandeliers, my suit perfectly pressed.
Jessica handed me a glass plaque etched with my name. Outstanding Customer Satisfaction, Jennifer Walsh. The applause thundered through the room. My team cheered, their voices rising like a tide. I smiled, steady, strong. In that moment, I wasn't the woman crying in a powder room after Margaret silenced me. I wasn't the invisible wife at Thanksgiving. I was someone worth celebrating. Later that night, in my apartment, I set the award on the shelf and looked in the mirror. This time, I recognized her. The woman in the reflection wasn't begging for approval. She wasn't shrinking under scrutiny. She was standing tall, shoulders squared, eyes bright. And for the first time in years, I whispered to my reflection without hesitation, "You are enough." Back in David's world, cracks spread quickly. Emma's video, meant as entertainment, had leaked within the family circle. Relatives whispered about cruelty, about humiliation. Margaret's reputation at the country club suffered quiet but sharp blows. "You planned this?" one of her friends asked in disbelief. "In public? On her birthday?" Margaret's smile, once unshakable, began to falter under the weight of judgment. She had wanted a spectacle. She got one, but not the kind she'd planned. A year later, Jessica knocked on my office door. "There's a regional conference in Chicago," she said. "We'd like you to represent Grand Plaza." My heart soared. Travel, recognition, opportunity. That evening, as I packed my suitcase, I thought of Margaret again, her voice on the phone whispering prayers that David would come to his senses. He had, just not in the way she hoped. The conference was electric. Ballrooms filled with leaders in hospitality, workshops buzzing with innovation. I stood on stage, speaking about customer service strategies, my voice confident and steady. Applause thundered through the room, business cards stacked in my pocket. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was thriving. 18 months after the pink envelope at Romano's, I unlocked the door to my new office. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched across the city skyline. A mahogany desk gleamed beneath recessed lighting. A brass nameplate waited for me. Jennifer Walsh, Guest Services Manager. The title still stunned me. From serving pasta at Romano's to running a team of 12 coordinators in one of the most prestigious hotels in the state. The salary was close to $60,000. A company car sat in the garage. For the first time in my life, I had savings that grew instead of shrank. I leaned against the glass, watching the city pulse below. This was my life now, and no one could take it from me. But David tried. His messages became relentless. "I didn't know what my mother planned. I regret everything. Please, can we talk?" At first, I deleted them unread. Then one night, curiosity made me open one. It was a photo. Us, on our wedding day. My smile radiant, his hand on mine. The caption, "I miss this." I stared at it for a long time. Then I placed my phone face down and walked away. He didn't miss me. He missed control. He missed a version of himself who hadn't been exposed. And he missed the woman who no longer existed. The country club whispers grow louder. She really gave her divorce papers in public? On her birthday? Who does that? Margaret's face, once the perfect mask of grace, now twitched at the edges. She avoided certain luncheons, skipped charity events. One evening, I overheard two former acquaintances at the hotel bar, women in designer suits, sipping martinis. "Margaret's daughter-in-law manages this place now," one said, nodding toward me. "The one she called a waitress?" "The very same." Their laughter wasn't cruel, but it was sharp. Margaret had tried to erase me. Instead, she'd etched my name into her own downfall. Emma stopped posting her smug little inspiration articles in the family group chat months earlier. Instead, I saw her name on LinkedIn, viewing my profile. Once, twice, then every week. Curiosity disguised as envy. The last video she had filmed, the one of my birthday ambush, no longer circulated. I suspected she'd deleted it, or tried to, but by then, too many people had seen it. The evidence lived on. Jessica, my mentor, called me into her office one morning. "I want you to handle our VIP accounts," she said. "The executives trust you. You're our strongest communicator." The portfolio is heavy. Celebrities, CEOs, government officials, people who expected perfection. I accepted without hesitation. Each signature I added to contracts, each hand I shook in the lobby, felt like a nail sealing shut the coffin of Margaret's judgment. It happened one Friday evening. I was leaving the hotel, the sky streaked pink with sunset, when I saw him leaning against a silver sedan. David. He looked smaller somehow. The sharp suits replaced with rumpled khakis, his hair thinning, his face tired. "Jennifer," he said softly, stepping forward. The sound of my name from his mouth twisted my stomach. "What are you doing here?" I asked, voice flat. I had to see you, to tell you I'm sorry. I didn't know what my mother planned that night. I swear I didn't." I laughed once, sharp. "You held the camera, David. You aimed it at my face." He winced. I thought it was just a joke. You didn't stop it," I cut in. "You never stopped her. Not once." His eyes glistened, but I felt nothing. Can we try again?" he asked, voice trembling. I studied him, the man who had let me bleed out in silence while his mother cut me down piece by piece. "No," I said simply. "You don't get to rewrite this story." I walked past him, heels clicking on pavement, each step an exclamation point. At the next Grand Plaza Gala, I stood on stage once again. This time, not just for recognition. I was giving the keynote address on hospitality leadership. The ballroom glowed with chandeliers, executives filled round tables, wine glasses catching the light. My voice echoed through the hall as I spoke about empathy, about resilience, about the strength of people overlooked. Every word was a rejection of Margaret's voice, every applause a nail in the coffin of her cruelty. Jessica stood at the back, smiling like a proud parent. I closed my speech with a truth that felt etched in fire. People told me once that service work wasn't respectable, that it was temporary, meaningless. But service is the foundation of leadership, and those of us who learn it first know how to lead best. The standing ovation roared like thunder. I never saw her face to face again, but through whispers, I learned Margaret rarely left her house now. Some said she'd aged a decade in a year. Some said her friends had turned cold, embarrassed to be associated with her cruelty. Her mirror, once her weapon, now reflected isolation. The woman who had tried to script my destruction was living inside her own. On Sunday mornings, I sat on my balcony, sipping coffee while the city stretched awake beneath me. I read novels I'd put aside for years, took long walks in the park, hosted colleagues for dinner in my apartment, laughter spilling into rooms that once held only silence. There was no criticism here, no judgment, no whispered prayers for my disappearance. Just me and a life I had built. One evening, sorting through mail, I found a letter addressed in David's handwriting. I opened it with steady hands. "Jennifer, I filed for bankruptcy. The firm collapsed. Emma barely speaks to me. Mom's health is failing. I just want to know, how do you keep standing after everything?" I folded the letter back into its envelope, placed it in the drawer with the others. He wanted my secret, but my strength had never been his to take. That night, I stood again in front of my mirror. The woman staring back was unrecognizable from the one who once cried into tissues in a powder room while Margaret rewrote her life. This woman was steady, unapologetic, and finally free.
2 years after Margaret's birthday gift, I found myself stepping onto a stage in Chicago. The conference ballroom stretched wide, chandeliers raining gold light onto hundreds of executives, managers, and industry leaders. Cameras flashed, microphones tilted toward me. Behind me, a giant screen bore my name in bold letters. Keynote speaker, Jennifer Walsh. Guest services manager, Grand Plaza Hotel. I smoothed the lapel of my navy suit, steadied my breath, and began. I didn't speak about profit margins or occupancy rates. I spoke about dignity, about how every guest and every employee deserve to be seen, about how empathy builds empires. When I finished, the standing ovation lasted long enough to feel unreal. The girl who once folded laundry on a kitchen table while her mother-in-law whispered prayers for her failure was now being applauded by CEOs. News travels fast in circles like Margaret's. Her country club friends had been whispering for months, but after the conference coverage appeared in the Business Journal, my photo smiling confidently from a podium, the whispers turned sharp. She manages Grand Plaza and speaks at conferences now? Didn't Margaret say she was just a waitress? Margaret's silence became legendary. She stopped attending luncheons altogether, stopped hosting dinners. Her name, once wielded like currency, now curdled into pity. She seems unwell, someone would murmur. No, she seems exposed. Emma's LinkedIn profile pinged my notifications weekly. She'd switched jobs twice in 18 months. Hopping from one marketing firm to another. One night, I received a connection request from her. No message, just the click of curiosity. I didn't accept. The same woman who once recorded my humiliation like a viral clip now watched my career like it was a series she couldn't stop streaming. It was autumn when David showed up again. I was leaving the hotel, coat draped over my arm, when I saw him waiting on the curb. His car was older now. Rust curling at the edges, his suit was wrinkled, tie loosened like defeat. "Jennifer," he called, stepping into the streetlight. I froze. For a moment, I saw the boy I had married. Confident, charming, smiling at me across a crowded bar. But then I remembered the man who held a camera steady while his family tried to destroy me. "What do you want?" My voice was steady, flat. He held out a folded piece of paper. "I signed the house over to Mom. I couldn't keep it. The firm's gone. Everything's gone." I stared at him, waiting. His voice cracked. I miss you. I miss who we were. I made mistakes, but I can change. We can start over." The audacity stung more than the words. "Start over?" I repeated. "You watched me burn. You helped light the match." He flinched. "I didn't know." "You knew enough." Silence stretched between us. The city roared around our stillness. Taxis honking, pedestrians laughing, neon lights flickering. Finally, I stepped closer. "Do you know why I'll never go back, David?" His eyes searched mine desperately. "Because the woman you're begging for doesn't exist anymore. You killed her. And the woman standing here doesn't need you." I turned and walked away. Behind me, I heard the sharp sound of him sobbing into his hands, but I didn't look back. Months later, word reached me through Linda, the same friend who had once been Margaret's gossip partner. "She hardly leaves the house," Linda said quietly, sipping her martini at the Grand Plaza bar. "People stopped calling. She's not Margaret anymore." I pictured her mirror, once polished, once her ally. Now it must have been her prison. The woman who orchestrated my destruction was now trapped in the ruins of her own reputation. The hotel hosted its annual gala again.
This time, Jessica introduced me not just as a manager, but as a leader shaping the entire guest services strategy. As I stood on stage, lights hot on my face, I thought of Margaret's living room. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, each holiday where my name was erased, my work ridiculed, and I smiled because I had rewritten the story. In my apartment, the city lights glittered outside my window like a constellation built just for me. I poured wine into a glass, set my award on the shelf, and leaned back against the sofa. The silence was beautiful. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full of freedom, of self-respect, of possibility. I thought of the pink envelope again, the one Margaret had chosen so carefully, and I whispered into the quiet. Best gift I ever received.
2.5 years after the birthday ambush, I unlocked the door to my new office. This one wasn't just glass walls and skyline views. It was higher, bigger, more commanding. A brass plate glinted on the door. Director of Guest Services, Jennifer Walsh. My salary had crossed into 6 figures. My staff spanned 3 departments. When I spoke, people listened. The girl who once cried in the powder room at Easter dinner now had an office larger than Margaret's living room. And unlike Margaret's house, people actually wanted to be here.